I thought I knew her, every curve of her smile, every beat of her heart. But that night, in the dim light of the room, I was forced to confront a truth I wasn't prepared for. The woman I had trusted with my very soul was now in the arms of someone else. The earring I found on the floor wasn't hers. It was an icy reminder that everything I had believed in, everything we had built together, was nothing more than an illusion. The betrayal cut deeper than any blade ever could. Now, here I stand, drenched by the rain, the storm outside reflecting the chaos that churns within me. How do we arrive at this point? And more crucially, how do I escape it? Your turn, Mr. Pond. Toby glanced up at the woman across from him, a slight smile tugging at his lips. She had spoken with a certain tone, one that always left him searching for words. It was difficult to respond with something clever, for she had a way of rendering him speechless. He turned his attention back to the chessboard, their game having stretched for about 15 minutes now. Toby was enjoying it more than he expected. He had played chess for most of his life, learning the game from his grandfather as a child. It was their way of stepping away from everything else. He felt confident he was about to win, but Beatrice's recent move had caught him off guard. Now he was left wondering if it was a genuine threat or just a distraction. Good move, Beatrice, but I think it's just a diversion, Toby said, his eyes scanning the board. I still believe I can win in 3 moves. He made his move, looking up at her, only to find her deeply focused on the board. She was quiet for a moment, studying the pieces before making her next move. Toby noticed her reaction. She seemed to be struggling, her brow furrowed in concentration. A loose strand of hair fell into her face, and she absent-mindedly tucked it behind her ear. It was such a simple gesture, but it caught his attention in a way he didn't expect. Just then, a splash broke the silence, followed by laughter from the other side of the pool. Beatrice's attention shifted, distracted by the noise. He followed her gaze and saw his wife, unexpectedly leaping into the pool, sending water splashing everywhere. The pool was outside, warmed by the sun, and Toby had already enjoyed a swim earlier. He preferred the peace of it, not the rowdy splashes of the others. Glancing back at Beatrice, he noticed she hadn't taken her eyes off him. "I give in," she said with a resigned smile. "You were right. I didn't see it before, but now that you pointed it out, I realize that pawn is going to be my downfall." She reached across the board, extending her hand. Toby took it, shaking it firmly. "Best of 3, she suggested. Toby smiled and began to reset the pieces. "Are you sure you don't want to swim or hang out with the others?" Beatrice raised an eyebrow. "What? And leave you in peace and quiet? I brought a book," she said, laughing. "You came to a place like this and brought a book?" Toby asked, genuinely curious. "I didn't really want to come, to be honest," she admitted. "This kind of gathering isn't really my scene." She chuckled softly as she rearranged her pieces and made the first move. Toby watched as she leaned back, clearly deep in thought as she considered her next step. "That's an interesting start," Toby remarked. "It's called the Caro-Can defense." Beatrice shrugged, not fully understanding the chess terminology. "I don't know chess openings by name, but I've seen that before. I don't usually play it," Toby replied. "I noticed you tend to play more aggressively." She laughed again. "That's a weakness in my game. I'm better with the white pieces. I prefer to start strong. Good luck. I play better with black. I tend to hold back more," Toby said, making his move and blocking her advance. He quickly predicted what she would do next. "Is that your style, just defending?" he asked, taking a sip of his cold soda. She paused for a moment. "I guess I'm cautious by nature. People tend to worry more about what they might lose than what they could gain. I get that about myself. And others?" Toby raised an eyebrow. "A good guy?" she asked playfully. He met her gaze, his voice steady. "We all see ourselves as the heroes of our own stories, don't we?" He shook his head slightly. "I'm not a good guy. I know that and accept it." He paused, then added, "I try to be the best person I can be, given my situation, but no, I'm no hero. What about you? Do you think you're a good person?" Beatrice's smile deepened, and it was clear she was intrigued by his question. "I wish I could be a good person," she said softly. "I really do. It's just, life doesn't seem to want that from me." Toby's curiosity piqued. That sounds like a story I'd like to hear. She chuckled quietly, but her voice turned serious. You never know, my story isn't the kind that's easily shared. It's a bit tricky at times. Beatrice nodded, her eyes briefly dropping to the board, then quickly changing the subject. The conversation shifted, and they continued their game in silence for a few minutes. Meanwhile, laughter echoed from the other side of the pool. Toby glanced up to see what was happening. His wife was sitting on their host's shoulders, while other couples did the same, balancing on their husband's shoulders. The playful game continued, but Toby and Beatrice remained apart from the others, the dynamic of their conversation both intimate and distant. Toby noticed how different their game was from the carefree fun going on around them. Their chess game, like their conversation, was quiet, an island of calm amid the noise and chaos of the day. They were sitting together playing chess. "We can play if you'd like," she said gently. "But if you'd rather join them, go ahead." Toby shook his head. "Even if I weren't playing chess, I wouldn't join them." "What about that book you brought?" He smiled, a little amused. "I see what you're up to, and I respect your strategy." Her smile widened. "Am I that obvious?" "Not exactly, but your strategy is pretty clear," he said, moving his knight. "There, I've ended its suffering." She shook her head, realizing that his move had ruined her plan. "Next time, I'll bring a better game. We'll see how that works out," she said, loud enough for him to hear. Toby chuckled. "Beatrice, don't let anyone know what you're thinking." She laughed. "Am I that transparent?" He leaned back. "Not really, but you made your plan too obvious." She made a face and then glanced away before continuing. "He's my date, not just a friend." Toby nodded, apologizing. "Sorry, I wasn't sure what you two were." "No problem," she said. "He seems nice, but I don't think he's that invested." "In what way?" Toby asked, pausing to focus on his next move, but also trying to distract her. "I don't know," she said, her tone becoming more thoughtful. "I just feel like he wants to keep his options open. Maybe it's because he's from France, but he doesn't seem that engaged." Toby looked up, intrigued. "He's not really French," he corrected her. "His family's from southern France, but he's fully American. The accent's a bit much, though." She raised her eyebrows. "Really? I wouldn't have guessed." "Sorry, I thought you two were together," Beatrice said, her expression turning slightly embarrassed. Toby held up a hand. "Beatrice, I'm being nosy. Let's just focus on the game, okay? I hope I haven't made you uncomfortable." She smiled gratefully. "No, it's fine." They fell back into silence, both concentrating on the board. She had the upper hand, but Toby was holding his own, feeling more challenged by her. "Tell me about you, Toby. What do you do for work?" she asked, breaking the silence. Toby paused, then grinned. "Don't ask me about my job, okay?" "Why?" She raised an eyebrow. "Is it a secret?" With a playful gleam in his eyes, Toby replied, "I'm a consultant. I help small businesses." "Oh, that sounds interesting," she said, clearly intrigued. He studied her for a moment before replying. "It can be, but sometimes it's kind of boring." She let out a laugh. "I knew it. You just say that to make it sound exciting." Toby chuckled. "It can be dull, but I enjoy the variety. I like meeting different people, and sometimes I can really help them. That feels great." "What kinds of businesses do you work with?" she asked, leaning forward. "Well, I have a couple of Turkish barbers, 2 taxi companies, and a few small businesses like laundromats and vending machine services." He smiled at her response. "You could say it's a cash-based economy." She smirked. "Sounds like it." Toby shrugged, his eyes on the game. "What can I say? I try to help. I invest a small part in their business, and then I support them with whatever issues come up." Beatrice seemed to think about it for a moment. "What about your wife? What does she do?" Toby smiled softly. "She's here with her boss. He's our host." "What does he do?" she asked, curious. Toby's smile faded slightly. "He owns a family business, and he's a lawyer. You know how they say lawyers make good money? Well, he's wealthy." Beatrice gave him a searching look. "Not a fan of lawyers?" Toby shrugged again, a smile still on his lips. "Behind every great success, there's often a story. My wife's boss is a successful lawyer who handles a lot of business deals. She's just started as a paralegal at his firm. She seems comfortable around him," Beatrice said, a subtle tone in her voice. "They seem close, don't they?" Toby noticed the way Beatrice's gaze shifted. He could sense there was a hint of discomfort, but he let it slide, not wanting to make her feel uneasy. He made his move on the board with a small grunt, and Beatrice immediately knocked over her king in frustration. "That's not fair," she complained, her tone lighthearted but tinged with annoyance. "You're too good at this." Toby raised his eyebrows. "That's 2 wins for me. A lesson for you if you want one." He took a sip of his drink, clearly enjoying the playful atmosphere. "What's the lesson?" Beatrice asked, her eyes narrowing slightly as if she was gearing up for a rematch. "Know the rules of the game you're playing," Toby said. "Sometimes you think you're in one situation, but you're really in another." Just as Beatrice was about to respond, the sound of a splash and laughter erupted from the far side of the pool. They both turned to see Toby's wife, who had slipped into the water unexpectedly, laughing as she surfaced. Toby let out a soft sigh. "Looks like she's having fun." Beatrice glanced at him, a wry smile on her face. "Sounds like a great time." Toby just nodded, his eyes lingering on the scene unfolding at the poolside. He couldn't help but wonder how he had ended up here, lost in the game, but still carrying the weight of the complex emotions that hovered over everything. That evening, they gathered for dinner, seated at 2 tables of 4. Toby found himself across from his wife, with Beatrice and Jean-Claude, their host, beside him. "I didn't know you played chess, Toby," Jean-Claude said as they got comfortable. Toby didn't glance at Beatrice, though he could imagine the smile forming on her lips at the mention of chess. He nodded, a smile of his own forming. "My grandfather taught me when I was younger. He loved the game." Jean-Claude chuckled. "Not really my thing. I know how the pieces move, but I don't enjoy playing games much." "It's an interesting game," Toby replied, continuing the conversation. "I saw you reading after your game. Was it a good book?" Jean-Claude paused. "I'm reading the Game of Thrones series again. Have you read them?" "No, not really," Jean-Claude replied. "I'm not much of a reader, too busy. But I did watch the show. The scenes with the dragons were amazing." Toby nodded thoughtfully. "The books tell a much richer story. The show did a good job, but I prefer the deeper world the books create." Jean-Claude stared at him for a moment. "I tried reading one, but it was difficult. Those books are pretty thick." "Yeah, they are," Toby agreed. "It's about a power struggle between rich families, though, loosely based on the English War of the Roses. It's detailed, and you have to really focus to catch everything. But it's worth it when you do." "You're a consultant, right?" Jean-Claude asked, shifting the topic. "Helping small businesses?" "That's right," Toby replied. "I'm lucky. My company's doing well. We've built a good name for ourselves in the market, steady income, ongoing projects. Caroline told me you have a small house in the suburbs and are thinking of starting a family soon." Jean-Claude continued, glancing over at Caroline, who was listening in. "We're lucky," Toby said, his gaze briefly meeting Caroline's. "I make a nice living doing what I love. We got a comfortable life, and things are looking up. No complaints here. I've always felt we've had a strong marriage. A happy life together." Jean-Claude seemed to consider this before asking, "Family is important to you, Toby?" Toby took a moment, choosing his words carefully. "My parents have passed away. I didn't have any siblings. I was mostly raised by my grandparents, mainly by my grandfather, since my grandmother wasn't as involved." He reached for a bottle of red wine and poured for everyone at the table. When it was his turn, he grabbed a glass of water and took a sip before continuing. "Family means a lot to me. When my grandfather passed away, I felt really alone. I had to grow up quickly. The world was confusing. I was just 16 and had to make tough choices. It was a hard time." Jean-Claude nodded sympathetically. "It seems you've managed well, though." Toby shrugged, his tone light. "I did what I had to. Learned fast and adjusted to get by. I survived. I'm lucky." Beatrice leaned in, looking at him with curiosity. "You don't have anyone? No family?" Toby smiled at her. "I have my wife," he said, raising his glass to Caroline before taking a sip. "We can create a family together. I'm excited about it. I think I'd be a good father." Jean-Claude nodded sagely. "You need financial security to build a solid family, my friend. It's essential, especially when children come into the picture." "I agree," Caroline added. "Having enough savings before children arrive is crucial. You don't want to worry about money while raising your kids." "Exactly," Jean-Claude said. That's no way to live. You should have a good amount saved up. It said that the two main causes of tension in a relationship are money and priorities. If you can work one of them out, things get easier. If you can work both out, you're lucky. Toby nodded thoughtfully. I think you're right. Before we start a family, financial stability is a must. If something happens to me, I want to make sure my loved ones have what they need to secure a good future. Jean-Claude smiled approvingly. That's a wise perspective, Toby. Do you have financial security set up? Toby hesitated for a moment before answering. Not quite yet, but it's coming together. The plan is in motion. I just need to be patient and careful. We'll talk about this more later. I have some ideas that might help improve your situation. Toby noticed a brief exchange of glances between Jean-Claude and Caroline. She nodded in agreement, and Toby raised an eyebrow. I'd be foolish not to listen to your ideas, he said, amused. What do you do, Jean-Claude? He asked, leaning forward, curious. A small smile appeared on Jean-Claude's face. I'm the senior partner. I represent my family on the board. I handle some cases, but mostly I focus on ensuring the company is well managed for the future. It's a family business. That's impressive, Toby remarked, taking another sip. You're the fifth generation? Yes, Jean-Claude replied. It's very important for the well-being of my family. Toby hesitated before asking, do you have children, Jean-Claude? Not yet, Jean-Claude answered, his voice calm. I hope to one day. Toby glanced at Beatrice and noticed her surprise. Her expression quickly shifted, and Toby winked at her subtly, the only one who saw it. He cleared his throat. Any nieces or nephews? He asked, shifting the conversation. Jean-Claude shook his head. No, nothing like that. Toby leaned back a little surprised. Wow. So, what's going to happen to the company in the future? Just as Toby asked the question, he felt a quick nudge from his wife. He went slightly, not expecting it. Ow, he said, confused, before noticing that Jean-Claude and Beatrice were looking at them. My wife thinks my question was a little too direct, he explained with a grin, trying to hide his discomfort. Jean-Claude raised an eyebrow. Well, it was an interesting question, he said, clearly try to be diplomatic. Toby shrugged. Sorry, I didn't mean to overstep. Beatrice seemed to agree, her face now a little flushed. The dinner conversation continued, though the awkward tension lingered for a while. Toby didn't think his question was inappropriate. Turning to Beatrice, he asked, You've been quiet. Care to tell us a bit about yourself? Beatrice seemed a bit hesitant to speak, but finally responded, I'm a business student at State University in my third year. What do you enjoy about your studies? Toby asked with a friendly smile. She thought for a moment before answering. I like learning about how money works and the lengths people will go to earn and keep it. Toby raised an eyebrow, intrigued by her perspective. What do you mean by that? Some people are willing to do anything for money, Beatrice said. They might change their values or do things they wouldn't normally consider just to get it. Toby let out a quiet chuckle at her frankness, but quickly turned it into a cough as he reached for the glass of water that Beatrice passed him. Thanks, he said, taking a sip. That was insightful, he thought. But then he noticed his wife's expression. Caroline didn't seem too pleased about how he was talking with Beatrice. Do you know what you want to do after you finish school? Toby asked, trying to shift the conversation back to her. Beatrice shook her head. Not yet. My life's been a bit like that. I've tried a few things, but nothing has really clicked for me. Toby nodded understandingly. Take your time. You don't need to rush into anything. Figure out what matters most to you, and then move toward it. Don't let anything distract you from that. There was a quiet pause at the table after his words. What about you? What's your next step? Beatrice asked, bringing the focus back to Toby. He took a moment, sipping his water before responding. I want to start a family. Beatrice raised an eyebrow. Big family? Toby chuckled lightly. Not really. It's not about the size, Beatrice. Even if people say it is. Beatrice nodded, as if she understood exactly what he meant. I didn't have a very close family, she said softly. I had parents and siblings, but we weren't really connected. What you said really resonates with me. Toby smiled at her, appreciating her openness. Exactly. I want to create something different. A family where love, respect, and kindness are at the center. That's what matters to me. I think we should start ours soon, he continued. I just need some time to wrap up work and get my business in order. After that, I'll be ready to focus on us." Beatrice smiled at him, clearly touched by his words. "That sounds wonderful." She raised her glass. "To bright futures." "To bright futures," Toby echoed, lifting his glass in return. The conversation drifted naturally. "So, family plans for me and my partner. Study and travel for you," Toby said, glancing at Beatrice. "And Jean-Claude, I imagine you're also working on your future plans?" Jean-Claude took a sip from his glass, his expression thoughtful. "Yes, we all have our different goals. But maybe we can help each other along the way." Toby smiled at the older man's words. "That sounds like a good idea." As their appetizers arrived, Jean-Claude gestured toward the dish in front of Toby. "Crab. An interesting choice." Toby looked at his plate. "Crab? That's not something I expected," he said, raising an eyebrow at his wife. Caroline gave him a teasing look, as if to say, "You have no idea what you're in for." "It's an interesting choice," Toby repeated, poking at the crab. After a moment, he reached for the hammer and tapped it gently on the shell. Jean-Claude, noticing his slight hesitation, asked, "Have you eaten crab like this before?" "Yes," Toby replied, "but not like this. Normally, I don't have to break it apart myself. Someone else does it for me." He tapped the hammer again, but it bounced off the shell. He could hear Beatrice chuckle softly from across the table, while his wife gave him a disapproving look. Toby shrugged and put the hammer down, deciding he'd leave it to the experts. Jean-Claude offered him a special tool. "You break the claws with this. Want me to help? I can ask the chef to do it." Toby waved him off. "No, it's fine. I'm not a child. I'll manage." Jean-Claude laughed. "It's a good lesson for next time, right? Just get the stuff from a can. It's easier that way." Toby smirked, deciding not to take it too seriously. "That might be the way to go," he said, buttering his bread roll and trying to focus on something else. It wasn't long before Toby felt himself relaxing, amused by the whole situation. He poured himself a glass of water and waited patiently for the others to finish their appetizers. As the dishes were cleared, Toby suddenly had an idea. "Did you know that crabs are basically sea spiders?" he asked with a mischievous grin. Jean-Claude, who seemed to appreciate the odd facts Toby often shared, nodded. "That's true. People don't eat spiders, but they'll eat crabs." Beatrice, chiming in, added, "It's funny, right? But it's true. People are fine with crabs, but not spiders." Toby smiled. "A couple of years ago, I visited some business contacts down south, and they served me something surprising. Would you believe they serve fried tarantulas?" The table paused for a moment as everyone processed that image. Jean-Claude raised an eyebrow. "Fried tarantulas?" Toby nodded, his grin widening. "Yes, and believe it or not, they were actually quite tasty." The conversation lightened as they shared a laugh, and the evening flowed into more casual, enjoyable talk. The appetizers were finished, and the main course was on its way. The situation had become slightly uncomfortable, but Toby still managed to chuckle. Special treat, or maybe just a challenge for visitors. Same as some cultures serving whole sheep heads or unusual meals. Not sure if it's a treat or just a test for those who didn't bother to research before visiting, he said, trying to ease the tension. "Seems simple, doesn't it?" Caroline replied. "You have to be ready for what's ahead, but some people enjoy surprises, the unexpected things that catch them off guard." Toby chuckled again. "Well, if they enjoy the crab, I guess," he said with a grin. But as he glanced at his wife and Jean-Claude, he noticed their expressions weren't as amused. A slight irritation flickered across their faces. "Sorry if I sounded rude." Toby apologized quickly, realizing the mood had shifted. Jean-Claude's tone turned a little more serious. "Crab is a big part of the region I'm from in France, Toby. It's one of my favorites." "I didn't know you were from France," Toby said, trying to shift the focus and remain casual. "Where exactly are you from?" "My family's from Biarritz," Jean-Claude replied. "We still have a place there." "I've heard it's beautiful now," Toby said. "A fishing town, right? And the food is supposed to be amazing." "Been there?" Jean-Claude looked surprised. "No, but I'm planning to go once work settles down. The history of the place is fascinating." Toby smiled. "I feel connected to that place too. My heart belongs to a beautiful castle not far from here." His words carried a subtle note of pride, but Toby remained polite, his attention shifting to the well-cooked steak that was served next. The meal continued with casual conversation, and Toby sipped his water slowly, making light remarks when appropriate. Dessert arrived, cream brulee. The crack of the caramel on top was satisfying, and the sweet, vanilla flavor of the dessert lifted his mood even higher. As the meal concluded, Jean-Claude raised his finger to get everyone's attention. "Toby, Caroline, I have a proposal for you," he said. Toby exchanged a glance with his wife, who looked intrigued. Toby kept his expression neutral and declined a drink, wanting to remain alert. "I think our goals align, and we could help each other," Jean-Claude continued, making his intentions clear. Toby nodded, urging him to proceed, but he noticed Beatrice smirking, clearly amused by the unfolding conversation. Jean-Claude leaned forward, his voice becoming more serious. "Toby, I need to be honest with you. You came here under false pretenses." Toby raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Jean-Claude paused, making sure everyone was paying attention. "This isn't a corporate retreat. It's something else entirely. You and your wife have dreams that need financial support. You want to build a future, start a family, find a home that aligns with your vision." Toby was quiet, watching Jean-Claude closely. "That's true, but I think I can manage on my own." Caroline, however, chimed in, her voice a bit sharper. "Why should we settle for the life we have when we can aspire to more? Look around. This place is incredible. Why shouldn't we aim for something like this?" Toby tried to stay calm. "I appreciate what we have, Kaz. I'm proud of the life we've built together. Not just a house, but a real home. What matters is love, happiness, and laughter." Jean-Claude's voice softened. "Don't rush into decisions based on dreams that might not come true." Toby sighed, feeling a growing distance between him and his wife. "It's just an idea, Caroline, not something concrete. But we can make it happen. We will. But you need to trust our path, not chase dreams that can easily fade away." His wife's frustration was evident, but Toby remained firm. He leaned back in his chair, thinking. Jean-Claude, noticing the tension, asked, "Mr. Pond, Toby, have you seen the movie Indecent Proposals?" "Yes, I have," Toby replied, a little caught off guard. "Not sure if it's well known, but honestly, I didn't expect to be reminded of it like this." Jean-Claude smiled slightly. "Sometimes luck is on your side. I have an idea that could help you achieve your dreams. I want to offer a chance for you both to have an incredible weekend. You'll have time alone at my home, and I'll make sure no one interrupts." Toby looked around the table, his discomfort growing. Beatrice seemed entertained, covering a smile with her hand, while his wife appeared shocked. Jean-Claude continued, "I'll give you $250,000. Enjoy the weekend, and the money will be in your accounts by Monday morning." Toby, holding his composure, immediately declined. "No, I appreciate the offer, Jean-Claude, but I have to say no." Caroline's response was more hesitant. "Maybe we should think about it. Just consider it before making a final decision." Toby's voice was firm. "Caroline, I care about you, but please don't take his side against me again." Jean-Claude leaned back, swirling his drink thoughtfully. "Toby, I work in a major law firm. I handle business deals worth millions of dollars. This isn't personal, just a business offer." Beatrice leaned in slightly, her voice quieter. "Toby, don't let him get to you. This is just a business discussion. It's not personal." Toby, still not comfortable with the conversation, said, "I'm just not comfortable with it." Toby appreciated Jean-Claude's offer, but firmly expressed his values. He turned to his wife, his voice steady. "Jean-Claude, my wife's time is not something that can be traded or negotiated." Caroline spoke up, her voice clear yet soft. "I really want to go through with this. It's my choice, and it carries a lot of weight. This is a chance that won't cost us much. It would be a mistake to let it go." Toby shook his head, his tone serious. "I don't think this is right. It feels harmful to our marriage and goes against what we believe in. The money doesn't matter," he continued. "Your loyalty is far more important than any amount of money." Caroline countered, her voice quiet yet determined. "That's just your pride talking. You've let what others think guide you. Nothing will change after tonight and the next few nights. We've been apart longer before when you traveled last year. It will feel different this time. I think it's more about your sense of betrayal than anything else." Toby's face tightened as he tried to convey the gravity of the situation. It feels like you're choosing a different path instead of staying true to our bond. You're saying my commitment means less to you now, he added. But my choices won't change how I feel about you. After I come back, we can focus on starting a family. Caroline seemed taken aback. This chance could help us reach our dreams. Why can't you see that? Toby shook his head firmly. You may have good intentions, but for me, the trust will be broken. If you move forward with this, our marriage will be over. We won't have a future together. Caroline appeared shocked by his words. I understand you're upset, Toby, but it's unfair to threaten our relationship over something you think is small. It's not about what you think it is. It's how I feel. Toby paused, taking a deep breath, feeling the weight of the conversation. He had to make her understand how serious this was. I care about you, but I can't ignore what might happen. His mind raced, unsure if she fully grasped the consequences. You're not leaving with him, he said, half to himself. I honestly think she might, Beatrice chimed in, sounding like she was observing the situation as an outsider. No, Toby, that's not true, Caroline protested. They just want to avoid any trouble. Toby scoffed lightly. I'd bet anything that by the time we get back, they'll be gone. Beatrice raised an eyebrow, smirking. Okay, fine. I'll take that bet. She held out her hand and Toby shook it, still uncertain of where this was heading. There. Does that make you feel better? She teased, her playful tone only highlighting the tension in the air. Toby exhaled, his mood shifting slightly. Absolutely. I'll be $100 richer and ready to say, I told you so. But really, how does it feel to be treated like this? He added, his voice taking on a more serious note. Beatrice laughed. One of the few honest things I've said since I got here is that I feel lucky in this situation, and I really meant it. The more he talks, the less I trust him. I'm not a good person either, Toby muttered. I'm the kind of guy you should be careful around. Well, you may not give yourself enough credit, Toby, Beatrice replied, shaking her head. But he's definitely not trustworthy. Plain and simple. You may have your issues, but you have more honesty in you than he does in all his actions, she added. Thanks, Toby replied, but there was a hint of bitterness in his voice. If you really knew me, I don't think you'd feel that way. Beatrice smiled, unfazed. Well, if things go as planned, I'll have a couple of days to learn more about you. Toby chuckled softly. At least your chess game should get better, he said, trying to lighten the mood. The next morning, Caroline told him that phones wouldn't be allowed at the retreat, so Toby left his in the car. It was a small sacrifice, he thought, and he didn't mind helping his wife with her plans for the weekend. The lack of a phone didn't bother him much. After a while, he made his way to the pool, stretched, and jumped in, savoring the refreshing water. Swimming had always been something he loved. He swam for almost an hour, focusing on the rhythm of his strokes and the coolness of the water. It was a welcome distraction from the tension of the previous night. Once he finished, he walked over to the garden, facing the rising sun. He draped his towel over the handrail nearby and took a deep breath. Slowly, he started his morning Tai Chi routine, moving through the familiar poses with concentration. His focus was absolute, and he let go of the distracting thoughts that had plagued him, concentrating only on the movement and the moment. After completing his routine, Toby stood still for a moment, letting the warmth of the sun seep into his skin. He wrapped the towel around his shoulders and walked back along the side of the pool, feeling the calm that the Tai Chi had brought him. Beatrice was waiting on the porch, a spread of fruit, coffee, and cereal in front of her. She pointed to a chair, and Toby sat down, joining her for breakfast. That's a lovely way to start the day. Is that Tai Chi or something else? She asked. Tai Chi, Toby replied. I've been doing it for years. My grandfather taught me various forms when I was a kid. It helps with staying calm and being aware. It's amazing to watch, Beatrice said, eyes wide. You look completely focused. It's a bit like yoga, he continued. It's good for balance, flexibility, and being present. It helps clear the mind. Beatrice smiled. Did you sleep well? I know you had a tough time last night. Toby shrugged, not wanting to dwell on it. It's the second night in a new place. Different sounds, different smells. It took a while, but I can't complain. No, this place is really nice, Beatrice observed. Hey, I brought you breakfast. Thanks, Toby said, pouring himself some orange juice. He grabbed some fruit and cereal and began eating, noticing how Beatrice looked in her outfit, which perfectly complemented her eyes. Her long brown hair was pulled back in a ponytail. Do I look okay? Beatrice asked, a playful smile on her face. Toby chuckled. Was I that obvious? It's fine, he said. I noticed when you were moving around earlier. Sorry, there's not much to see. I'm not really the strong type. Not every woman wants someone who's all muscles, she replied. I prefer someone who is kind and thoughtful. If I thought you liked the strong type, I might have tried harder. Toby gave her a knowing look. I guess I like kindness too. She laughed softly. Don't get too full of yourself, but I'm enjoying my time with you this weekend. I think I'll have more fun with you than with Jean-Claude. Toby smiled slightly, his eyes still on her. I hope so. We have 2 days to spend together, and I'd like to get to know you better. What do you want to know? She asked, her voice light and teasing. Toby paused, choosing his words carefully. Honestly, I just want to know who you really are. I mean, the real you. Let's see how we connect. She gave a soft, thoughtful laugh. Sometimes I'm not even sure who I really am, but I do like the idea of spending time with you and seeing where it goes. You could tell me about your studies or what college life is like. That could be interesting. Toby nodded, taking another bite of his breakfast. He noticed she was watching him with curiosity. After a few moments of silence, he met her gaze. What? He asked, raising an eyebrow. I can't believe how calm you are about all of this, she said, eyeing him. You seem to be handling everything pretty well. He shrugged. I guess I'm just the calm type. Nobody's that calm, she replied with a skeptical look. Toby's expression hardened slightly. Maybe you realize that this weekend is just a moment in time. It's not something worth destroying a marriage over. Beatrice paused, then glanced at him again, her tone soft but firm. No, I mean, why are you so calm? It's years of your marriage that's gone. Toby's face didn't change. If I give you a real answer, what do I get in return? She grinned. Ooh, making a deal? I know how you work. You tell me the truth, and I'll do the same. Let's build some trust then, Toby said, giving a slight nod. Fine, it's a deal, she said, leaning back in her chair. Okay, so why are you so calm about this? He asked, now genuinely curious. Beatrice hesitated, choosing her words with care. It's not what it looks like. I'm pretending to be calm. Inside, I'm hurting a lot. Toby stared at her for a moment. No way. You can't hide that well. I should be seeing something. Beatrice raised an eyebrow. You're sharp, Toby. But yeah, I'm in pain. I just have a good poker face. Toby sighed, his gaze dropping to his plate for a moment. Honestly, I saw this coming. A satisfied smile flickered across Beatrice's face. Toby, still looking at her, chewed thoughtfully before responding. A quiet silence passed between them. Toby spoke first. I know that, but your turn now. Your answer will help me. She nodded. You promised honesty, remember? Toby chuckled and nodded. I remember. So, what's your connection with Jean-Claude? How do you know him? Beatrice asked, her tone shifting slightly, now more focused. Toby leaned back, taking a sip of his juice and watching her carefully as she pondered his question. Jean-Claude hired me through an agency. I met him Friday morning, just a few hours before you and Caroline arrived. I'm here as his employee, just for the weekend. Beatrice raised an eyebrow. That's all? You're telling me there's nothing more between you two? Toby leaned in slightly, meeting her gaze. Come on, that's too simple. Why are you really here? Beatrice paused for a moment, her eyes narrowing as she chose her words carefully. I'm here because I was curious. An opportunity came up, and I took it. I didn't know exactly what was happening this weekend. I just thought it might be interesting to find out more. And is it interesting? Toby asked. Beatrice hesitated for a second, then nodded. Yes, but it's turned out in a way I didn't expect. Toby's expression softened. Now back to you. Caroline's behavior started to change about 4 or 5 months ago. It wasn't anything major, just subtle shifts in how she connected with me, how she acted towards her job. I'm observant. I pay attention to patterns. I have to. I live my life on guard. He paused, sipping his juice before continuing. She's really affected my life. It may sound dramatic, but when I met her, I was in a tough spot. She inspired me. She made me want to improve myself. Toby stood up, walked to the coffee table, and poured himself a cup. He offered her the pot, but she declined. Meeting her made me want to change. I've told you before that I'm not exactly the good guy. I never really aimed to be. I just wanted to get by, do what I had to. But when I met her, I wanted to be the person she thinks I can be, not who I currently am. Beatrice's expression softened, but she didn't interrupt. Toby sat back down and continued. We built a really good life together. For our ages, we're doing well. I just need about 3 to 6 more months to get everything right. But I'm not there yet. I'm not the person she thinks I am. The kind of man I want to be, the kind of man who can be a good father, a good husband. That's who I want to be. Just 3 to 6 months more. Beatrice nodded slowly, watching him closely. What do you still need to do? Toby paused, his face tightening. Sorry, but that's not something I can share. Beatrice's eyes narrowed slightly as she waited for him to continue. Toby sighed, taking a moment to collect his thoughts before speaking again. I did a little research. I'm a very careful person. I learned a bit about Jean-Claude, but making things clear answers your question as much as I'm willing to share. Beatrice leaned back, surprised by the unexpected depth of his response. That's not what I thought I'd hear, she admitted, almost to herself. What did you think you'd hear? I don't know, he answered. I knew something was off, but I didn't know why. I understood you were involved, but the details were unclear. Before Beatrice could respond, they heard footsteps approaching from behind. 2 people appeared on the porch, greeting them with a casual good morning. The quiet atmosphere of the conversation shifted again. Hi, Dwayne. Hi, Ruin. Beatrice greeted with a smile. The couple walked over to Toby's table. We won't interrupt you, Dwayne said. To be honest, we're not really sure what to say. We're just here to keep an eye on you and make sure you're safe until they return on Monday morning, Ruin added. Sounds good to me. I just want to relax for the next few days, Toby responded. Great, Dwayne said, waving before he and Ruin walked away. Did you know they're actually married? Toby asked, turning to Beatrice. Beatrice raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. No, I didn't think. I'm not sure what I thought. Yep, they're married. Just like Lance and Jenny. Neither Lance nor Dwayne are actually lawyers, by the way. They work for Jean-Claude. Beatrice looked puzzled. Why would someone like that need help? I know, right? It's strange. When I got here Friday morning, they introduced themselves as lawyers. It threw me off. Beatrice shook her head. How much do you know about them? She asked. Toby chuckled. Now that's a good question. How much do any of us really know? Do you know what information asymmetry means? Beatrice gave him a curious look and shook her head. No, it's just a fancy way of saying something simple, Toby explained. I know what I know. You know what you know. But we don't know what the other person knows or doesn't know. There's always some hidden information that could change everything. It's like a guessing game. Beatrice thought about it for a moment before replying. I understand. It's a simple idea, but I can see how it might be complicated. Exactly, Toby agreed. I had doubts about this weekend. Jean-Claude had doubts too. Beatrice raised an eyebrow. How do you know that? He said a few things yesterday that made it clear he had looked into my background. It was like he had some understanding of me. Gave me a glimpse of how he thinks. Beatrice was quiet for a moment, processing his words. So what does that mean for us? She asked. Why would anyone want to know about you? Toby looked at her closely. I don't know. I'm just the husband of a paralegal. Why are people like this here? Why introduce them as lawyers? Beatrice was deep in thought, and Toby admired her sharpness. He was aware of the delicate balance of the situation, and he hoped she wouldn't dwell on it for too long. How about we play some chess? Toby suggested. We can take a walk later, get some fresh air. Beatrice smiled, clearly ready for a change of pace. Sure, let's play. Sunday evening came quickly, and the past 2 days had been a mixture of emotions for Toby. He had enjoyed getting to know Beatrice better. She was clever, witty, and fun to be around. Despite her best efforts, she hadn't won a game of chess yet, and Toby could tell it frustrated her. He respected her competitive spirit. He had grown fond of her, valuing their friendship. Still, he could sense that Beatrice was holding something back, just as he had his own reservations about some topics. Jean-Claude had hinted that Beatrice might be open to him, because his wife was away, but Toby chose not to ask. He didn't want to risk what they had. They spent the weekend walking, swimming, and playing chess. Conversations flowed easily, though both of them chose to avoid certain sensitive topics. Toby had finished his book, and he slept soundly Saturday night. The house was lovely, and Dwayne and Lance were polite, giving them plenty of space. The food was plentiful and good, making for a relaxing weekend. Toby was grateful, though he knew the time had come for him to think about his next steps. Dinner on Sunday night was simple but comforting, a chicken and bacon salad with fresh bread. Toby looked at Beatrice as they ate. "How are you feeling about tomorrow?" he asked casually. She shrugged. "I'm okay. How about you?" "It's going to be hard," he replied. "I'm not sure how they'll handle their decisions after saying they wouldn't. It's really affecting me. I'm uncertain how they'll fix what happened." Beatrice looked at him with understanding. "Are you sure she's been unfaithful?" Toby sighed. "I can't say for sure, but it doesn't really matter. We live in a place where you don't need a reason for a divorce. She hasn't shown me that she's been completely honest. Her actions, leaving with him when she knew the risks, make the question irrelevant to me." "I get it," Beatrice said. "It sounds like you think she strayed." "Yeah," Toby said quietly. "But it's not just about that. It's about the fact that she went with him when I said no." Beatrice nodded. "Do you think she'll challenge this?" Toby paused before replying. "Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure she will." Beatrice raised an eyebrow. "Why?" Toby took a bite of his salad before answering. "I think this weekend was planned from the start." Beatrice's eyes widened. "Planned?" Toby nodded. "I mentioned yesterday that I had some worries about it. I really started to pay attention once I realized something was wrong." Beatrice smiled faintly. "Better late than never, huh?" Toby gave a rueful smile. "I guess so. Sometimes things slip, even in good relationships. It hasn't slipped too far. I'm not away often, and I show her I care regularly." Beatrice gave him a thoughtful look as they continued their meal, each quietly pondering what the future might hold. Toby felt confident about the role he played in his relationship. "I'm a good partner. I treat her well. There's little she can complain about," he said with a steady tone. Beatrice, however, didn't seem entirely convinced. "But did you really try harder?" she asked. Toby nodded in acknowledgement. "I did. I increased communication, took her out more, did thoughtful things, but it didn't seem to make a difference." He paused, clearly reflecting. "I asked her directly. She reassured me many times that nothing was wrong and that she was happy. I did everything I could, up until coming here." Beatrice nodded, encouraging him to continue. "I had a moment of clarity recently," Toby continued, the tone in his voice turning more serious. "I was worried about this retreat. I talked to her and made it clear that I wouldn't tolerate disrespect, that our commitment had to come first. Any breach would have serious consequences." "And how did she respond?" Beatrice asked, leaning in, intrigued by his change in tone. Toby's expression darkened as he thought about it. "Just wait. I was direct, and then it hit me. I wasn't just fighting for her. I was fighting against the idea of betrayal." Beatrice gave him a confused look. "What do you mean?" Toby took a deep breath. If she was going to stray, it was her issue, not Jean-Claude's. He's the one showing interest. She could have set boundaries. She could have told me what was going on so we could work through it together. But she chose not to. "I've tried to be the best husband I can be," he added. "I've made it clear what could happen, but she made her choices." Beatrice furrowed her brow. "You don't think she believes you?" "I think," Toby began, "she doesn't believe it'll end the marriage. She probably thinks I'll be upset, but that I'll eventually come around. She's just waiting for the discomfort to pass." Toby shook his head. Beatrice leaned back, processing his words. "But you think there's another side to this, right?" she asked. Toby nodded, his voice softer now. "I think they're hoping I'll accept it, that I'll accept her relationship with him." Beatrice's eyes widened. "Wait, what do you mean? Accept it?" Toby looked at her, locking eyes for a moment before continuing. "I think Jean-Claude wants to have a child with Caroline, and I would help raise it with her. I wouldn't be surprised if he's hoping for something like that." Beatrice leaned back, stunned. "That's quite the leap," she said, shaking her head. "Honestly, I didn't see this weekend going like this." Toby chuckled, shaking his head. "It's hard to predict things like this." He paused before continuing. He mentioned on Friday that he needs someone to carry on his family name. He's not looking to marry, but if I go along with it and don't push for a divorce, he might offer more, enough for Caroline to have a child with him. And we'd co-parent. Beatrice processed the information slowly, her mind working through the possibilities. And if you confront him, you might stay together and get the benefits? She asked. That's a smart plan. Toby nodded thoughtfully. It is, but how many times has he tried this before? Or are we the first couple he's approached? Beatrice gave him a skeptical look. You can't be sure. Toby smiled, his confidence returning. Trust me, I've done the digging. I've spent a lot of money to find out, and I made sure it was accurate. I had someone else double-check it. Beatrice paused, clearly impressed. Okay, I believe you. He's rich, right? Toby nodded. If I'm right, he could keep trying this until he finds the perfect couple to get what he wants. Even if it causes some mess along the way. He's willing to pay for the result. Beatrice raised an eyebrow. Wouldn't some people accept that kind of offer? Sure, some might, but not me, Toby replied, firm in his stance. Beatrice pushed further, curious about his reasoning. Why not? Toby sighed, feeling the weight of the situation. Think about it. What's the real loss? Is it worth giving up something good for the chance at money? I don't know, Toby admitted, unsure. I mean, it feels wrong, but I'm not sure I'm ready to throw everything away for this. Beatrice saw the conflict in his eyes. Is it really that bad? She asked, her voice gentle but probing. It's just one tough conversation or two. Is it worth risking a good relationship over? Toby hesitated. The doubt was evident on his face now. I really don't know. I thought I had it figured out, but now, I'm not so sure. Beatrice smiled knowingly. Sometimes things aren't as clear as we want them to be. Toby gave a half-hearted shrug. Yeah, maybe you're right. I need to think it over. She didn't press him further, but gave him space to reflect. After a long silence, she suddenly asked, how much does a paralegal make? Toby glanced at her in surprise, then shook his head with a slight grin. Not much. This chance to improve your life. Will it come again? If I were in your shoes, I'd find it hard to pass up, Toby said. You made it clear, but maybe she thinks you're a reasonable person who could change your mind. Maybe she believes you can see things from her perspective. She might trust that your marriage can withstand this challenge even more than you trust her, Beatrice suggested. Sounds like you might think she's right, Toby replied, looking at her closely. I'm not sure, Beatrice answered. It's easy to judge from the outside. It's much harder when you're actually in it. Every time I think about it, I see another side. Toby paused, gathering his thoughts. I think there are two main problems here. First, the lack of honesty. Second, this seems like more than just a one-time issue. It might be pointing to deeper problems. I feel like trust has been seriously broken. Beatrice nodded, understanding. And lastly, Toby continued, I feel hurt. This is my marriage. My future feels at risk, and it's weighing heavily on me. Working with him, all of it, it's really affecting me. Consider the possibilities, Beatrice suggested thoughtfully. Think about what could be, the opportunities, the kind of life that could be created. It's tempting to focus on the idea of a better future. Life's challenges often present themselves in different forms. Toby woke up early that Monday morning, just as he had the last 2 days. He started with a swim and then did his Tai Chi exercises, repeating the moves until he felt steady. Caroline's return was on his mind, so he wanted to remain calm and focused. Beatrice wasn't downstairs when he was ready for breakfast, so he ate alone, slowly, letting his thoughts wander. Despite taking his time, she still hadn't appeared when he finished. He went back to his room to pack up his clothes and toiletries. After checking everything thoroughly to ensure nothing was forgotten, he left with his suitcase. As he walked through the foyer toward the door, he heard a voice. Hey, Toby, it was Dwayne. You're not leaving yet? Dwayne asked, approaching. No, Dwayne, I'm not leaving, Toby responded. I'm just putting my suitcase in my car, so I don't have to deal with it later. Dwayne chuckled softly. You'll leave when we say so. Patience. Please move out of my way. I'll leave when I choose, Toby replied, maintaining his calm. If I want to go now, no one can stop me. You're not going anywhere yet, Dwayne said, crossing his arms. I'm just putting my things in my car, Toby repeated. Step aside or prepare for an argument. Dwayne eyed him, but Toby remained composed. "I'll walk you to your car," Dwayne said. Toby walked past him to his car, unlocked the trunk with his key, and placed the suitcase inside. After closing it, he locked the car while Dwayne reached for the key. "No thanks," Toby said, heading back toward the house. Dwayne didn't look happy, and Toby noticed. "You need to learn some manners," Dwayne said, following him. "Are you going to teach me?" Toby asked, turning to face him. "I doubt your boss would like that, but I'm open to discussing it later. Just let me know." Feeling braver, Dwayne smirked. "You feeling strong now, Toby?" "I'm strong enough," Toby replied, calm and collected. He took a moment to clear his mind, sitting by the pool in the morning sun. He sipped his coffee slowly, trying to calm himself. The tension from their earlier conversation still lingered, and he needed some quiet to reset before moving on. As he sat, he thought about his past with Caroline, the special moments, their wedding day, their new home. He was careful with the coffee, knowing too much could stir up more worry. So he switched to water to help calm himself. Lance approached and gestured for permission to join him. Toby nodded and put his phone away, ready to listen. "They're coming back soon?" Lance said. "I just got a call from them," Lance added. Toby stayed quiet, processing the news. "I know this is tough for you," Lance continued. "You didn't choose this situation, but we're here to make sure everything goes smoothly. You understand?" Toby took a sip of water, thinking about Lance's words. "You've been with Jean-Claude for a while. You help him and others in a lot of ways." Lance nodded, acknowledging Toby's point. "The woman with you is your wife," Toby said, noting the surprised look on Lance's face. "Not just someone here for fun. What else do you want me to tell you?" Toby asked. "The names of your kids, your babysitter's name, or where your grandparents live in Indiana? Why aren't you a Marine anymore?" Lance took a deep breath before answering. "You need to hope, Lance, that we don't have any issues today. If something happens, it could come back to you. There's no need for problems," Lance said, standing up. "But if you start something with Jean-Claude, I will respond strongly, and it won't be easy." Lance walked away, leaving Toby with a quiet smile. Still, Beatrice had not yet appeared. Toby wondered if he should go look for her. In the time they had spent together, she had been observing him closely, and he wondered what she was thinking. He assumed she would want to stay with him to see how everything unfolded. He still wasn't entirely sure he understood her. She was unpredictable. She wasn't mentioned in any of his research, nor was she involved in Jean-Claude's life. He would have known if she had been. He grabbed his phone and returned to his work. About half an hour later, he saw Lance and Dwayne step outside with their wives, drinks in hand. They sat at a different table, close enough to hear any issues that arose. Then, Caroline appeared on the porch with Jean-Claude. They scanned the area until they spotted him and walked over. "Hey," Caroline greeted, approaching him. She was dressed casually, looking relaxed and at ease. She seemed calm. Toby nodded at her, and she took a seat across from him, with Jean-Claude sitting between them. "Where's Beatrice?" Jean-Claude asked. Toby shrugged and turned to Caroline. "I want to leave. Before you go, there are a few things we need to discuss," Jean-Claude said gently. Toby eyed him. "Have you taken care of everything with her?" he asked coolly. Jean-Claude's expression showed confusion. "My wife. Have you finished the arrangement?" "No, not yet," Toby replied. "Then do it," he added firmly. "It's important." Toby's wife spoke up, sounding tired. "I'll take you home. Then you can pack your things and leave. It was just one weekend," she continued. "It's not a big deal. A good weekend, actually. I know you're upset, but please, focus that on me, not Caroline," Jean-Claude said, revealing a touch of frustration. "I'm not going to hurt you, Caroline. That's not who I am. But I won't be around you anymore. We're finished." "Toby, there are good reasons why that might not be wise," Jean-Claude said. "I really don't want you to regret this. Just give me 5 minutes and then decide with all the facts." "Please listen to him," Caroline said. "It matters. Things have changed. I'll listen if you both agree that after 5 minutes, we leave. No more questions. It's settled and we go," Toby said. Jean-Claude smiled confidently. "Deal," he agreed. "Complete the agreement," Toby said. "I'll speak first. Time is ticking, and I won't listen until you finish what you need to say." Jean-Claude rolled his eyes. "My time doesn't start until everything is sorted. This doesn't count," Then please stop talking and handle the transfer. With a smile, Jean-Claude walked back inside. As soon as Jean-Claude was out of sight, Caroline began speaking. Toby, please be quiet. I don't want to hear anything right now. Toby interrupted, his tone stern and cold. She looked at him hurt. He turned away, refusing to meet her gaze. Jean-Claude returned to the porch. The money has been transferred. She'll need her phone back to confirm it. Jean-Claude glanced at Dwayne. Please get her phone. Dwayne moved slowly, taking his time. The table was silent until Dwayne returned with her phone. Caroline looked at Jean-Claude. Caroline, if you're not following what I said right now, then I will leave you here. Please, Toby, please be gentle. I know you're upset with us, but she is your wife, Jean-Claude said. Well, she used to be. If the money is there, move it to your savings account, Toby said, his voice steady. You really don't trust me at all? Do you? Jean-Claude asked. Toby shook his head. I can't trust you. Remember the last thing you said to me on Friday? It was the easiest choice, Jean-Claude replied. Caroline nodded and handed her phone to Toby. He squinted at it and saw that the money had been transferred to her savings account. You have 5 minutes, then we're gone for good, Toby said. Jean-Claude replied with a satisfied smile. Maybe not, Toby. Maybe not. I'm sorry for how we left things on Friday. I know you're angry with me and Caroline, and I wish that wasn't the case. Our actions didn't help, and for that, I'm truly sorry, Jean-Claude continued. Toby looked away, lost in thought. I hope you had a nice weekend. Dwayne and Lance said you were a great guest. They mentioned you spent a lot of time with Beatrice, but nothing went wrong. I'm sorry she was here to fill in for your wife. She would have been with you if that was what you wanted. Toby took a sip of his water. Time was passing, and the discussion felt hollow to him. I looked after your wife. She's back now and doing well. We had a good time, but nothing has changed. She's still the same person. She loves you, not me. She wants her life with you. His tone was calm and friendly. Toby could tell that Jean-Claude was skilled at talking things through, trying to make the other person feel at ease. I know this is hard right now, but trust me, after a few days, when you see that nothing has really changed, you'll appreciate the choices she made. It might feel tough right now, but she's made a wise choice. She's done a good thing for both of you. Soon, you'll see how helpful this will be. Toby, your worries will pass. You'll look back and see this was just a small moment in the past. You'll find ways to use what we have to reach your goals. You'll be glad I picked you two for this. Jean-Claude took a sip of his water. I chose you both because of your wife's wonderful qualities. And Toby, I knew you could handle this situation. You are calm and level-headed, and I respect that about you. Time's almost up, Jean-Claude, Toby said firmly. I mean it, I'm leaving. Jean-Claude raised his hands. Now you owe me a bit more time for interrupting. Just hear me out, Toby. You'll want to listen. He leaned in a little closer, speaking softly. I'm here to offer a new chance. I believe you and your wife would be great at raising a child. I want you both to think about helping me shape a brighter future. Think of the benefits that come with a good amount of support. You could work towards your dreams without worrying about day-to-day money issues. I understand you need a little time to think about everything that's happened. It's important to take a clear view of what I'm suggesting. To help during this time, I plan to assist Caroline with her work for a couple of weeks. This way, she can focus on what's important for both of you during your recovery. The aim is to create a warm and supportive home for any child raised. It's okay if my offer feels tough at first. Toby glanced at his watch. Time's up, he said, standing. Jean-Claude reached for a handshake, but Toby ignored it. Caroline, I'm leaving. You can come with me now. We need to gather our things, Toby continued, shaking his head. Everything's ready and in the car. Toby walked towards the car without rushing, but he moved with purpose. As he neared the vehicle, he spotted her. Her friends noticed him too, though they couldn't hear the conversation. They stayed by their car, watching the exchange, unsure of what would unfold. When she came closer, she said, "Wow, it's you. I wasn't sure I'd see you again." Toby nodded. You never said goodbye. I thought you might join me for breakfast, but you didn't. I didn't want to say goodbye. I had things on my mind. There was a conversation I wasn't ready for. Curious about what might happen? Toby asked. She chuckled lightly. I thought you could go in different directions. I was curious, but I didn't want to dig any deeper. He smiled. I get it. How about we grab a coffee and chat, she suggested. Sounds good. Denny's? Sure, she replied, offering him a ride. He got into the passenger seat, watching as she waved to her friends before driving off. Are they your friends? He asked. Just old work buddies, she answered, driving confidently towards the nearest diner. They parked and entered the diner. Toby opened the door for her, and once they sat with their coffee, he began. So, what should I call you? My name's Jennifer. You can call me Jen or Jenny, she said. Nice name, but I kind of like Beatrice too, he joked. She smiled. When did you figure it out? I guess you were in law enforcement right from the start. She raised an eyebrow. What made you think that? You worked with businesses that dealt mainly in cash. Anyone not involved wouldn't have noticed that. Plus, your story about school had some gaps. She laughed. School story, huh? I see it wasn't very convincing. Toby nodded. You said you were studying business at State. By the end of the first day, I could tell you weren't being entirely truthful. I made it up on the fly. We had to act fast, and my story had holes. I thought by the time anyone looked into it, I'd be far from the trouble. I noticed you left your phone behind. I thought you might have had to hand it in. But when things settled Friday night, I looked you up. She laughed. You never said anything about it. I couldn't really say much. I didn't know if you were on my side. I was in a tight spot. I'm sorry I couldn't do more, she said. You probably helped more than you realize, he replied. Having you around helped me stay strong. It kept me focused and reminded me of what Caroline had done. Jean-Claude didn't know who you were. Jennifer raised an eyebrow. I know. That surprised me too. He didn't recognize you? Toby asked, a little puzzled. No, I don't think he does. We weren't sure. But when we saw your name connected to a meeting at his place, we had to dig deeper. Toby nodded, taking it all in. Did you go there to gather information? We knew he'd have guessed over the weekend, and I fit the role best. So, I went, how did that work? Toby asked. The others couldn't help. There was a big event in town, or at least that's what we told him. You must have been nervous, he observed. We were, but we both had clean records, and the chances of something going wrong were slim. But we were surprised by how it turned out. You were watching me? Toby asked, still thinking about it. Not exactly. We were just gathering information. We knew your name came up a few times, but you always seemed harmless. I've left all that behind, Toby said. It's in the past. I heard, she replied softly. That's why I'm here. I was worried after the weekend, Toby said slowly, choosing his words carefully. Why is that? Some of the things I mentioned? The fact that you were in law enforcement? Even after everything, we still couldn't fully understand you. We looked into you, but your story stayed under the radar. Toby smiled a little. I hear you've changed jobs too? Jennifer laughed. Your information's good. I left last week. Today was my farewell party. I know. That's why I'm here. What do you want, Toby? She teased lightly. I divorced Caroline. She received her share and gained her freedom. I heard. I wasn't sure what choice you'd make. You seemed really torn on Sunday night. Toby nodded. I did a lot of thinking, trying to sort through what happened and how I felt about it. It was tough to figure out what was real and what was just feelings. You made a choice, she said, her eyes curious. There was always going to be a choice. In the end, I flipped a coin to help decide. Really? A choice like that? Seems a little hasty. Maybe, but it gives you a clear answer. Then you think about it and see how it feels. All right, I can understand that. I couldn't accept her choice. It just felt wrong. Maybe it was just a feeling, but it didn't sit right with me. So I changed my mind about ending things, and suddenly it felt okay. And why's that? He shrugged. It just felt better. I could give you reasons, but I could do that either way. Staying felt wrong, and that bothered me. After a brief pause, Toby went on, I'm okay with my choice. Be sorry, Jennifer. I stand by it. I guess that's what matters, Jennifer replied. Toby was watching her, trying to understand her feelings about his decision. The divorce went through with some fuss, but nothing too serious. I thought Jean-Claude would really fight for her, she said, cooling her coffee with a gentle blow. He did his part. I had good representation, and we made it a simple divorce. It was hard for him to make a real impact. He was more of a hassle than anything. He let Caroline down again. How are you and Caroline now? He took a deep breath. We're okay. We've talked a few times. I think she wishes things had turned out differently. She realizes she didn't know me as well as she thought. Jennifer took a sip of her drink, looking satisfied before speaking again. All right, let me ask you again, Toby, what do you want? I want you in my life, Clarice Starling. I admire your smarts and your sense of humor. You're capable. You wouldn't have graduated from Quantico if you weren't. We get along well, and I'd like to have you by my side. She laughed, catching the attention of others in the restaurant. You need to be honest with me, as long as you are too. You aren't keeping anything from me, right? No, I'm finished. No tricks. What you see is what you get. Just a jobless former escort, former FBI agent, former student. She smiled as she said this. Talking to one ex, I'm not sure how to describe you. Lord or Baron, I still don't know what you were, just that. He chuckled. I did well from it, but I'm done now. My money is clear and well taken care of. She looked confused. Every dollar has been tracked and is now invested in ways that will help me in the future. I'm not very rich, but I'm okay. You did well. I was lucky. Meeting Caroline changed my path. She made me think about my choices, and I found a way out. It took some time. It does. I wanted to leave without any trouble or anyone after me. I've done that. It took a lot of careful planning, but I managed. If, and this is a big if we were to be together, would I have anything to worry about? Jennifer asked, looking into his eyes. He shook his head. I've made mistakes in my past. What I was part of affected a lot of lives. I've gained from that struggle, but I didn't cause any issues, and I handled my situation well enough that you didn't find me. I think we'd be okay. He nodded, seeing that she seemed more relaxed. He smiled as he added, that said, I do need to leave town. I'm not in any trouble, but I want to move somewhere new to start over. That makes sense. I don't have any strong connections here either. He shrugged. I knew we were meeting tonight. You know how I am. I did my homework. You seem very confident, Mr. Pond. He smiled at her compliment. I've taken time to regroup since my marriage ended. I've managed my work, so I can look for new chances. I'm working on being a better person. Plus, I'm single and I think I have a lot to offer. Jennifer laughed. All right, so what would the future look like if I agreed to be your partner? He leaned back with a playful smile. I had a feeling you were interested. I am. I was curious before. I like how you spoke kindly about your past. Not always. I was a bit harsh when she came back. Maybe, but there was respect in how you talked about her to me. I like that. It was nice, especially on that last day. Last day? You weren't there. I got there after you both left. Jean-Claude really talked to those guards. Lance and Dwayne. Exactly. Good memory. He really gave them a piece of his mind. It felt like he sensed something was off about you. Did he say anything to you? She took a sip of her coffee, enjoying its warmth. Not much. He was surprised you didn't take the chance you had. Honestly, Toby, you made a good impression on him. He liked how you handled yourself. He reached out several times, attempting to persuade me to reconsider Caroline, and eventually offered me a position in his organization. Jennifer nodded. You remained calm and focused. You held your ground. It's no surprise he was impressed. I was too. Toby lowered his gaze before meeting her eyes. I do wonder what would have happened if I had pursued that opportunity. But we'll never know, will we? Jennifer said with a small smile. Toby smiled back. She looked just as he remembered. Let's talk about us. You asked how I see our future. You're right to be curious. I'm currently out of work, but I have skills. I have my own sense of right and wrong. Even though I'm no longer with the Bureau, I won't break the law, and I won't let you either. I'd like to hear your thoughts on what comes next for us. Caroline is no longer in my life. My future doesn't include her. Her dreams for us are no longer possible. She has her wealth and made her choices. I don't want to engage with her. She belongs in my past. If I see her again, I'll be polite, but we won't be friends. Good. She made her choices. It's time for both of you to move on. Exactly. But Jean-Claude? That's another story. I want him to understand the consequences of his actions. He acts like he can do anything without facing repercussions. I want him to see the impact of his choices and maybe think twice. Okay, Jennifer said slowly. He's the top partner in a law firm that his family has owned for many years. He has a fancy house in France, a vacation home in Majorca, a ski lodge in Banff, and and a yacht in Bermuda, along with several properties in the U.S. He controls a trust worth over $200 million. He has bodyguards, a great reputation, and is well-connected. He's quite a formidable opponent. Yeah, like a character from a story. But sometimes, even the most unlikely people can find ways to challenge someone powerful. I'm determined to break down his power piece by piece and confront him directly. When he finally faces challenges, he'll know who stood up to him, where you could find support. Try new hobbies. Writing can be quite helpful. Maybe meet someone new with whom you can share your future. Just a thought, he said. Toby laughed softly and leaned back in his chair. I'm not just looking for anyone. I want someone who will support me, someone I can rely on. I've had my share of difficulties, and I want to explore the world while taking my time to deal with them. I believe patience is key, and I see you being a part of that. He noticed her thinking it over, sensing her interest. You don't plan to hurt him? She asked. No. I want him to understand there are consequences to his actions. He needs to see that, despite his position, I've put in the effort to hold him accountable. It's about making things right. What resources do you have for this? Jennifer asked, moving past the last comment. I have between 10 and 20 million, mostly set aside to create income for us. I don't have a permanent home or any goals other than to shake up his life. What about Dwayne and Lance? I heard something happened with them. There was a miscommunication. They're both out of the picture for now. Dwayne was involved in a mix-up recently. Things got a bit out of hand one night in a parking lot near a bar, and he lost to someone smaller. Did the police get involved? Toby shook his head. It was a fair fight. He had his chance, but couldn't handle it. He lost fairly, but he's no longer with Jean-Claude, and neither is Lance. You had a disagreement with him too? She asked. No. He just felt it was time for a change, so he chose to leave. We talked, made amends, and now he's working for a reliable contact of mine. Jennifer nodded. If I wanted to get involved, what would be our first step? I think our first priority would be getting to know each other better and maybe doing some research. Okay, that sounds good. I like research. It's like studying. You get to learn new things. I need to leave town, not immediately, but sooner rather than later. I was thinking about spending 6 months in Biarritz, if that sounds good to you. 6 months? You're not rushing things. Plans need time to develop, and I've heard Biarritz is a beautiful place. Toby shrugged. Getting familiar with each other will require patience. We have plenty of time to work on our dreams, so why hurry? Let's take it slow and enjoy the experience. I like how you think, Mr. Pond. Ready to go? And so they did. Hey listeners, if you enjoyed watching this video and want to stay updated with our latest content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.